about the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Chabad, Chassidus, and the founder of Chassidus in general. It was Rosh Hashanah, and he was gathered in his shul together with his Talmidim, and forgive me, I believe actually it was in Yom Kippur. He was gathered in his shul together with his disciples, with the townspeople, and they were in this shul davening on Yom Kippur. In the very back of the shul, there was a young Jewish peasant boy. He had never been in a shul before. In fact, this was the first time that he was really in a Jewish community. He lived on a farm. It was difficult for them to ever travel into the city or wherever it was that the closest Jewish community was. And this was the first time that his parents had brought him with them to a shul on Yom Kippur. They wanted to be with other Jews on Yom Kippur, and they brought him along. And he was standing in the back of the shul, obviously did not know a single word of Hebrew, had absolutely no idea what davening was all about, and just sitting there in the back of the room and participating by watching. At some point during the davening, the disciples of the Baal Shem Tov who were standing near him saw that the Baal Shem Tov's prayers, his tefillot, began undertaking an entirely different form of fervor. He was davening with far greater intensity, and his mood seemed to change to one of anxiety and almost sadness. Without understanding what was going on, but realizing that something not so good was happening, the Baal Shem Tov's students began raising the level of intensity of their own tefillot. The townspeople seeing what was going on, and they too began davening with even greater and more heartfelt devotion, tears. And it wasn't long before the entire shul became a crescendo of davening and of crying. And this young peasant boy standing there in the back of the shul, he sees something is going on. He sees everybody's davening, and he doesn't know how can he participate. A farm boy, very well able and capable of imitating the calls of the various farm animals, and it was something that he enjoyed doing. And of all the animals that he could imitate best, the call of a rooster was something he had down perfect. And people would admire the way that he was able to imitate a rooster. And he looks heavenward and he says, God, he says, I don't know how to pray to you. I don't know what language to speak to you in. I don't know how to approach you. The only thing that I can really do well is the call of a rooster. Let me give the call of a rooster, and you take it like the most beautiful prayer. And he throws his head back, opens his mouth wide, and begins cock-a-doodle-doo, cock-a-doodle-doo. The townspeople hearing that, how did a rooster get into the shul? They turn around and they see it was this young peasant boy, and they picked him up. They were going to throw him out of the shul. How do you disturb your davening like that? The Baal Shem Tov stopped his davening, turned around to the commotion in the back, and told them, no, leave him there, leave him. Don't do anything to this boy. And from that point onwards, the whole tenor of the Baal Shem Tov's davening changed from one of sadness and anxiety to happiness. When Yom Kippur was over and the Baal Shem Tov gathered together with his disciples for the post-Yom Kippur meal, one of them had the temerity of asking the Baal Shem Tov, Rebbe, tell us what happened. And the Baal Shem Tov said that during my davening, I perceived that there was a terrible decree that was hovering over us, the Jewish community. All of my tefillot, all of your tefillot, all of the tefillot of the townspeople, nothing helped. And then all of a sudden, there was this call of a rooster that burst through every single heaven, reached to the highest level that one could possibly reach, to the throne of Hashem himself, and the terrible decree was annulled. The Rebbe used to tell this story on a regular basis. Its message is an obvious one. Every one of us has different capacities, different capabilities. But at the end of the day, every one of us has the ability to communicate to Hashem and to communicate with Him directly. The reason that I tell this story now, and take the temerity of beginning with a story that I'm going to guess many of you probably have heard on more than one occasion, is because I think in a nutshell, it embodies the approach that Yiddishkeit has, not just simply to children with special needs, but to every single one of us, to every single human being. At the end of the day, the definition of who we are is not determined by what we can do, how we can act, what capacities and capabilities we happen to possess. At the end of the day, every single one of us is a child of God with a direct ability to have a relationship with Him. And that capacity and that ability is what makes every single human being, irrespective of who they are, an infinitely and absolutely valuable thing whose measure is beyond worth. Now, I think what I tell you is probably, and I try with all of my heart not to be pedantic. Every one of you know it. I cannot believe, but every one of you sees it and feels it in the reality of your lives, in the reality of our lives. That irrespective of the way society as a whole chooses to value and to place value or relative value of human beings, given their abilities to, for the most part, to make money, to acquire prestige, power, influence, status, or wherever it is. That's not the way Torah looks at a human being. The definition of a successful human being is a human being who is a good person. The good is defined by doing what Hashem wants us to do, to the best of our ability. No more and no less. So, the issue isn't, what is our perspective on a child with special needs? I think a more fundamental question, or a more burning question, is what's our perspective on a parent who has a child with special needs, on the family of such a child, on people who are faced with such incredible challenges, difficulties, hardships, as a result of their commitment to give this child, to give this human being everything that he or she needs, and in the best way possible. Allow me another story. It's a story that I, in fact, myself witnessed part of, but only many, many years later learned the rest of the story. It was about 35 years ago. I was a student at the time, learning in 770, near the Rebbe. And at one point, on a summer afternoon, there was an announcement that the shul was going to have to be emptied, that there was a group of special people that were going to be coming to see the Rebbe. The Rebbe was going to come down into the shul to speak to them, and that they were going to be the only ones that would be allowed to be in shul at the time that the Rebbe spoke to them. And in fact, that's what happened. The shul was emptied, it was set up differently. And it turns out that this special group was a group of disabled soldiers from the Israeli Defense Forces that had come on a visit to the United States, and their first stop was to visit with the Rebbe. I believe the name of the group at the time was Nechei Tzahal, the Handicapped of Tzahal. We, the yeshiva students and many others, were able to stand outside in the courtyard. There was a loudspeaker set up, and we heard the Rebbe speak to them. The essence of what the Rebbe said was that there's no such thing as a human being who's given a task that is beyond his or her ability to fulfill. If God doesn't do that. If God gives somebody a challenge, at the very same time, He gives him or her the commensurate capacity to rise to that challenge and to be able to fulfill it in the best way possible. And specifically speaking to these soldiers, the Rebbe said that the reality is that while you have incredible and difficult handicaps, and as a result of what you've done, physical difficulties, that in itself is an indication that you have incredibly greater powers and abilities to overcome those handicaps. And the Rebbe made the suggestion that the name of the group, instead of being Nechet Tzahal, the happy, it should be changed to Mitzvayonei Tzahal, the distinguished ones of Tzahal, the distinguished ones in the Israel Defense Forces, because in fact, you are the ones that have abilities and capacities that go far beyond the capacities of regular people. That was the gist of the talk at the time. Close to 30 years later, I read a story in a magazine where I learned the rest of that story. It was an article that was written, or an interview with a fellow who described himself as a fairly secular Israeli who had been married not long before the Six-Day War broke out. He was a type of construction engineer or contractor or something of that sort. When the war broke out, he was, as well as most other able-bodied people in Israel, drafted into the army, called back up to service, and came back from the war, Baruch Hashem, safe and sound. But several months later, when he was called up for reserve duty, he was assigned the task of clearing a minefield. And he was on a tractor, and a horrible accident occurred. The tractor evidently went over a mine. It flipped the tractor over onto its side, and he was crushed under the tractor. And unfortunately, he lost both of his legs. And he described the period following that horrible accident. He received the most incredible medical care and things that needed to be done to give him at least the ability to be able to continue functioning and so on. But then he describes a period following his hospitalization when he was ultimately discharged to go back to real life, one that was basically a downward and downhill slide, where he was profoundly depressed. He had lost so much of what he had considered his identity, it being so much tied up to his regular physical being. Now he couldn't do all of those things. He ended up losing his business, losing his marriage, losing his friends, and at one point became so depressed that he began thinking of, God forbid, losing his life as well. And it was during that period that somebody from this organization, an organization called Nechet Tzahal, got in touch with him and told him that they were planning a trip to America and asked him to join this group. At first, he wanted no part of it, but then thought, what the heck, what else does he have to live for or to look forward to? So he joined the group, and he describes how they came to America and their first stop. He describes how they came into 770, the Rebbe's shul, and how the Rebbe came down into the room to meet them. He said the feeling that he got when he first saw the Rebbe come into the room, it was like he imagined this is probably what the king of the Jews, from the time that we actually had a king, must have looked like. Described that the Rebbe sat down, and began speaking to them, and I was very happy to see that he described that talk in a manner very similar to the way I had remembered it. But then he said something, or described something that I didn't know anything about. He said after the Rebbe finished talking to the group as in general, the Rebbe got up and walked over to each one of these soldiers where they were sitting, most of them in wheelchairs, and said something to each one of them. He, for so many years, since the war, had been living with this sense of, I gave so much, I sacrificed so much, and no one even cares. I, in effect, gave my life for my country, for my people, and now I'm all alone. He said, the Rebbe walked over to me, and he said one word to me, and with that one word, he saved my life. The Rebbe looked into my face and said, Todah, thank you. And with that one word, like on behalf of the entire nation of Israel, recognized my sacrifice, recognized my contribution, and made my life whole again. I'm not a Rebbe. I'm not even looking at you. I'm looking at a computer screen, and the only face I see is my own. But from the bottom of my heart, what I want to say to each and every single one of you is to thank you for the incredible inspiration that you are to every single one of us in our lives and to the things that we need to do. Every one of us, the challenges that we need to face, and compared to the challenges that you incredible people face, onward to describe my feeling for it. We hope and we look forward to the time that there won't be hurt, that there won't be suffering, that there won't be challenges that are so, at least from our perspective, unfair. But we need to remember that until that blessed time comes, and it will come, but until then, what you are doing is incredibly valuable. The beings that you help raise and live provide an infinite amount of goodness to the world that we all live in, and it's our privilege to be part of that incredible effort. It says right here on the side, the chat box is now open, and please feel free to type your questions here. I'll answer them to the best of my ability, and I certainly look forward to the opportunity of having the chance to see you guys actually face to face and to share experiences with you. How do you help our children understand their difficult life? Is the first question that we have here. And I think that, let me tell you a personal story. We had a child who was unfortunately very sick, and at the age of 6, it was after we had seen miracle after miracle, and the doctors had given up hope time and again. We had hoped that our prayers for his recovery would finally be answered with a bone marrow transplant, and he underwent it. Our hope for cure was fine. Yeah, it's a miserable procedure for anybody, and especially for a little 6-year-old boy. It's horrible chemotherapy, intense radiation, and weeks of isolation in a hospital room. This was after 2 years of being in and out of hospitals. And he bore it always like a trooper. But it was late one night, and we were in his room, dressed as we had to be in gowns and masks. And he had, for those of you that have seen it or experienced, it's called a broviac, a line that through which she would be getting medicines and so on, and had a dressing on it that had to be changed every day. And it wasn't a painful procedure, but it was a very tense and anxiety-provoking one. And Shlomi would always get very tense and upset with him. And as my wife was doing it, he just burst out, as I can imagine your children did, or do on a regular basis, and said, "It's not fair. It's not fair." And so I did what any normal parents would do, faced with a theological question of that sort. I ran out of the room crying into the bathroom. My wife had to answer him. She was stuck. She was in the middle of doing the procedure. And she said to him, "Shlomi, it isn't fair, but that's the world that we live in. It's a world of gullus. It's a world where there is hurt and where there is pain. But it's also a world that Hashem promises us is going to change. And it's going to be better. And it's going to be good. Our job is to do the best we can the way we are, knowing that He's going to make it good. But right now, in Gullus, it isn't fair." And Shlomi just closed his eyes and he crunched up his fists and he just burst out, "This Gullus stinks!" So we heard it from our little boy 12 years ago. And I can imagine that you hear it from your children, from your very, very special children, in words or in gestures every single day. It wasn't fair then, and it's not fair now. It can get better. Hopefully it will get better. All of us have wonderful parts of our lives and good parts of them, and we need to focus on them. But always with hope, it will get better. Specifically, understand the difficulties. I'm not sure anybody understands difficulties. The best we can do is rise to them and turn them into good things. Does this mean everybody's gone to sleep? Somebody is asking a question. Did the Rebbe react differently when you came with your special children as to when you came with the other children? The Rebbe reacted to every single person that came to him uniquely, to that individual, to that person. I think that to describe this one more special than another, as I said very early in the beginning of our conversation, I think every single one of us is incredibly special, and we need to focus on the specialness of every single one of the individuals that are in our care or that we can in some way influence. Certainly, without a question of a doubt, I think we can make it a world where there isn't that kind of hurt. It's within our ability. How do you keep a healthy relationship with God in the face of these challenges? That's an incredibly fair question. And I think it's a challenge to Him probably more than it is to you or I, which is, God, how do you expect me to keep a healthy relationship with you when I have to face the incredible challenges that you're giving me? I think we have a right, more than a right, I think we have a responsibility to demand from God that He change our circumstances. We have a right to expect from Him that tomorrow will be incredibly better than today, and in ways that we can understand, in ways that we can feel. I'm not going to justify God's giving us incredible challenges because He's also given us the ability to rise to them and to overcome them. They come with an incredible amount of pain. They come with an incredible amount of hurt. Now, I'm not going to justify it. Do I believe with faith that He has His reasons? Of course I believe He has His reasons. At the same time, I also am absolutely sure that I don't know what they are. And so, I guess the issue isn't, quote, a healthy relationship, i.e., I look to you, God, and I'm thankful for everything that You've done to me and continue to do to my child. I believe that You're a loving God. I believe You love me, and I believe You love my child. But I sure don't understand You. We need to understand the definition of a healthy relationship is a relationship where there is a relationship. We continue talking, we continue communicating, but we don't necessarily get what we want. I don't believe that we are expected to look at suffering of another and in any way justify it as our only approach to that vis-a-vis God is, God, stop it. And yet, if I were pushed against the wall and say, but why do you think He does it? The only possible rational explanation, and there may very well not be any rational explanation, but is, if I can understand why He was doing it, then maybe I wouldn't find it hard to keep it from happening. If I can't understand it, then I'll fight it. And our job isn't to accept it. Our job is to fight it. Our job is to change it. Our job is to continue to make it better. And watching that hurt and seeing that hurt, it needs to inspire us to just do everything possible to make it different. And we do have the ability to do that. That's what we mean when we talk about Mashiach. And the way we do that is by making the world that we live in, beginning with our immediate world, a better and brighter place for everyone, especially for our children. Rachel asks, how can we help peers accept our children? I know enough about children and educating children to know that I know nothing at all about it. Children are incredibly perceptive. They understand a heck of a lot more than we think they do, and in fact, they often understand more than they do. They don't get stuff. They treat our children, as regular children, and allow other children to see through that external veneer of what makes them different to the inside, which is exactly the same as any other child. A living, vibrant human being who loves and needs to be loved. And it's, I guess, modeling behavior is probably the best way to expect others to follow along. What about the siblings of our children with special needs? They find life to be very difficult, embarrassing at times, and unfair. Yeah, they do. And at the same time, they're probably the best ambassadors to the rest of the world to let them know of how really special, how incredible their sibling is, and and how incredibly fortunate they are to have this very special sibling. I need to be somebody once came to the Maggid of Mizrich, an early leader of actually the successor of the Baal Shem Tov and one of the parents of the Hasidic movement, with the question, Rebbe, how do I deal with difficulties? And he said, go to my student Reb Zusha, he'll teach you. He went off to Anipoli where his student Reb Zusha lived, asked for Reb Zusha's home, and found him living in something not much more than a hut, in abject and incredible poverty, with children dressed in something not much more than rags. Clearly, Reb Zusha was not living a life of luxury and ease. And he comes into Reb Zusha and he says, the Rebbe sent me to you to teach me how to live with difficulties. And Reb Zusha said, to me? I should teach you how to live with difficulties? How would I know? I don't have any difficulties. What would I know about helping with difficulties? I guess I've been asked to talk because I'm a rabbi, and rabbis know everything. Well, aside from that, clearly not being the truth, to talk to a parent with children, one of whom or several of whom have special needs, and with siblings who face this challenge on a regular basis, and to give you advice, I'd ask you for advice. So with that caveat, clearly siblings need attention. That's probably the greatest challenge that you as a parent face in terms of their children, is making sure that they get the quality and special time that each and every child deserves to have. But when we first were sent on Shlichus as emissaries of the Rebbe's secretary called me into his office and gave me basically our marching orders. And before I left his room, he said something to me that stayed with me forever. He said, see to it to take your children with you when you go out, wherever it happens to be, even though they don't necessarily have to be there. But take them along, because they need to know that they're shluchim as well. And to a certain extent, one needs to be careful in making a child a partner, because children are children, they're not necessarily partners. But by the same token, in certain ways, they very much are your partners. And as a parent with a child with special needs, you have an incredibly special role. They do too. And letting them know and appreciate that, and knowing some of the rewards of that, can make it, I think, far less embarrassing and incredibly more fair. How do you teach others to be more accepting and inclusive? Again, I would come back to modeling. We have a fairly active friendship circle here in Stanford with close to actually more than 100 families that are involved who have children with special needs, well over 300 teen volunteers. And certainly our motivation for it, starting it and continuing it, was to help the families, help the children. And the reality, of course, is I assume all of you know, we've helped the teen volunteers far more. The appreciation that they have, not just for different than them in general, is so much deeper and every single one of them, and we heard from their parents, have grown in such incredible ways as a result of their interaction with these incredible children. It makes them, it gives them the ability to be incredibly more sensitive, and by second nature more sensitive to every other human being. So you teach them by showing them, and it's your special child is probably the best teacher.
Little sound, little sight. Yeah, well, that went to the buckle says working. No, come Tuesday. Oh. Oh. Okay, this is a good time for us to log out. You want to go log out? Yeah.
Okay. I'm not sure. I'm not sure where I got cut off or where I cut myself off. The notion of, or the question about having a special section taught in all schools about helping kids reach out to children with special needs. It's an integral part, certainly, of the curriculum of every single Jewish day school, and that is the first mitzvah, or the most important mitzvah, let us say, in the entire Torah of V'ahavta l'recha kamocha, love your fellow as yourself. And we're not talking about loving those that we're naturally attracted to or sympathetic towards. It's precisely to those that it's difficult at first glance to feel one with that the Torah is addressing us about. The problem, of course, with any curriculum or any classes that it's one thing to talk about it, it's a whole other thing to practice it. And coming back to the friendship circle, this is probably the greatest accomplishment of the friendship circle, is in that we don't talk about how important it is to be able to interact well with children who have special needs. It's interacting with them, and you don't have to tell them anything. They see for themselves the incredible rewards that has, and the side benefits of that it creates incredibly special people who are now sensitive to so many others. I have no doubt that 20 years from now, when the history of this time of the Jewish community at this time is taught, we will see that friendship circle is going to be placed at the top of the list of those things that have created a Jewish community that is so much more sensitive, so much more caring, and so much more inclusive. And I hope that by that time, or long before that time, Mashiach will have been here, and much of what we're speaking about today will become academic, because it'll all be good. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Again, I hope I have the chance to talk to you, to see you, and to share happy occasions with you. And until then, I hope that every one of you, together with all our people, have a ksiva v'chsiva tova, inscribed for a great, good, and wonderful Happy New Year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Deren. To answer one of the questions about the push for day school, for education in day schools, there actually is a project that we are hoping to work on, which will educate teenagers, high school teenagers, middle school teenagers, youth rabbis, with the art of understanding and appreciating special needs. So one of these days, hopefully you'll be hearing something about it, and thanks for bringing it up. Thank you all for joining. The room will be open for chat, for discussions, for anybody. Enjoy. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.